This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. There's no question the pandemic has impacted higher education, but two-year institutions have been hit particularly hard. In the most recent update to the Connecticut Board of Regents this month, its Finance and Revenue Committee reported the 12 community colleges, quote, face enrollment declines, operations limited by pandemic conditions, and long-standing financial pressure. And next fiscal year, the colleges could face a shortfall of $61 million. Recently, the Journal-Inquirer reported Assununtuck Community College in Enfield and Manchester Community College were among the schools with the sharpest decline in students since the pandemic started. Assununtuck seen a 27.4% drop in full-time enrollment since 2019, and Manchester seen a 20% drop during that same time period. The Journal-Inquirer reporting declining enrollment has been a trend for at least a decade. Today, Where We Live, we talk about the challenges facing Connecticut community colleges here and also nationwide. What's being done to retain students? Coming up, we hear about some of those efforts from Capital Community College in Hartford. First, we check in with the Chronicle of Higher Education. On Zoom with us is Lahr Gardner, a senior writer for the Chronicle. Lahr, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Our listeners can join as well, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You can share a comment on our Facebook page or find us on Twitter at Where We Live. So I laid out briefly some of the challenges in enrollment and revenue here in our state, Lahr, but nationally, what's happening with community colleges?
Well, community colleges have had a very difficult time during the pandemic. Four-year institutions, despite a lot of worries, ended up being relatively unscathed. And, some people might take objection to that, but relatively unscathed. Community colleges, for a variety of reasons, took very serious enrollment hits. In some cases, I've talked to institutions where they lost 25 to 30% of their enrollment that first fall back. And of course, that impacts their revenues. State budgets staying relatively solvent and federal money coming from the federal government have staved off the worst consequences. But institutionally, that's been a big impact on the institutions themselves. And of course, students, a whole cadre of students has been disconnected from education, and that has pretty serious short-term consequences and, of course, long-term consequences.
Let's talk more about the students that are being served by community colleges nationally. I was looking at an op-ed in the Washington Post from Columbia College. We'll be hearing from Columbia College later in the program. But the fact that when we think about community colleges enrolling more than a third of college students in the U.S. It's a gateway to higher education for many, including low-income and minority students, and how they've been impacted, Lahr.
Well, that's kind of the crux of the challenge and the problem for community colleges is that those are communities that were hit hardest by the pandemic and were face the most challenges in terms of dealing with school. More than one community college leader, when I spoke to them about their challenges during the pandemic, said some version of, in terms of students, life happened. Suddenly they had young children at home. A lot of community college students are parents. They're older and they have jobs, or suddenly they didn't have jobs and they had household bills piling up. It was a very challenging time for a lot of students, which of course made it difficult for them to continue their education. The figures are really startling in terms of the national losses. I mean, the public 4 years nationally lost about 4% enrollment overall between 2019 and 2021. Community colleges lost about 15% nationally, and the rates of loss among demographics like Black men much greater than the demographics for, say, white women.
When we talk about life happens, also dogs barking in the background. Lee, this is where we live, as we hear from Lee Gardner, senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education, with us as we talk about community colleges, enrollment declining, the trend being seen even before the pandemic, and now the pandemic has exacerbated it. If you're a member of the community college system, maybe you attend, you're a student, we'd love to hear from you about your program. Again, the number 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So knowing, Lee, that there are challenges that these leaders at these institutions have seen, talk about some of the strategy that they've tried, because we're talking about often also non-traditional students who are dealing with work situations, childcare, so many factors that can impact their college career.
Right. Well, the digital divide was a big. I don't know that you can call it a revelation, but I guess it was for a lot of administrators and a lot of folks. The digital divide was a big issue early on. A lot of community college students, when everything pivoted online, they didn't have laptops, they didn't have reliable Wi-Fi at home. So community colleges spend a lot of money on hotspots. And giving out free laptops. And that certainly made a difference, but it was not enough to make up the difference for many, many students. The big challenge is that community colleges have very diverse missions. They serve a lot of different types of students, from students who are still in high school, to students who are fresh out of high school, to older students who are as I said, working, or parents, or, doing different things. So no one angle of approach is going to work for everyone. I spoke to a student success person at a community college in Tennessee who was sitting in his office early in the pandemic with a bunch of spreadsheets with all these different data sources on students, trying to figure out, did this person transfer? We know they didn't graduate, trying to figure out how best to, categorize students so they could try to do outreach. And, they've had some institutions have had some success with things like call centers, with just sort of reaching out and saying, hey, we're still here for you. We want you to continue your education when you can. What do you need? But again, the challenges are very steep. And, frankly, a lot of students were not thrilled with online education. They didn't really like learning online, even when they were able to, and were waiting for colleges to come back on to come back on campus. Then again, I heard from other institutions that students were wary of coming back on campus because of COVID.
So we've been focusing on the current students, and some of the challenges they face to complete their degree, or institutions to retain these students throughout the degree process before they graduate. But what about when we think about incoming students and what we're seeing with high school graduates, or maybe students not graduating as high level as before, and how that's impacting the stream of potential students at community colleges, Lee?
Well, that's been one of the bigger demographics that has not shown up for community college the last 2 years, is students that are fresh out of high school. And I don't think that there's, at least I'm not aware of any kind of data or consensus on where those students are going just yet. But many of them are not going to community college. But yeah, there's a lot of worry among some of the folks I've talked to at community colleges leadership that a lot of community colleges have gotten rid of some of their developmental education courses. In the past, students might come to a community college and they might not have had a great education at their high school, and they would be asked to take a test, basically an English test or a math test, and they didn't do well on that test. They would be placed in a developmental remedial class to sort of hopefully bring them up to speed. And that was seen by many as a barrier, because, you would be put in this class, which was sort of like high school all over again, and it didn't feel like forward progress, and they would lose a lot of students that way. So a lot of community colleges got rid of that and started trying to find other ways to move those students along. Well, now community colleges are facing potentially several, years worth of students who are going to leave high school probably less prepared than they were before due to remote education because of COVID. And in a case where they've gotten rid of a lot of those remedial classes or those tests. So, there's a lot of uncertainty right now about how that's going to work when those students do show up.
And that uncertainty, as you mentioned, some courses being cut with steep enrollment declines impacting tuition revenue. So it's a tricky situation that these institutions are facing, trying to serve their students, but also thinking about what can be cut given the reduced resources. Lee.
It is. Community colleges do a difficult job, and they do it. They're often more under-resourced than their four-year fellows, at least if you look at it on a per-student basis. But the folks that I talk to at community colleges are sort of used to that. I mean, that's been how it is for many years now. I think that a lot of community colleges are doing some smart things with guided pathways, which I imagine we may hear something about, which is sort of taking a less laissez-faire attitude toward guiding students through the college experience. I think community college leaders are learning a lot of things through the pandemic, sort of realizing that some of the things that they're doing that they didn't think were barriers are more barriers than they realize. Having students have to come to campus to fill out this form or pick up this or that thing. That's difficult for working students. I had a administrator at a college tell me, well, our office is open till 6:00. And, if you've ever been a working person, it's not always easy to get somewhere by 6:00, even if you have a job that ends at 5. And so, it's not that people aren't well-meaning and trying to do well by students. It's just that colleges have certain ways of doing things. And I think that college leaders are starting to realize that some of those things that they've been doing for a long time were barriers more than they realized that they were.
When we look at the way the last couple of years have impacted higher education, and in the past, when there's an economic downturn, things haven't actually turned out in terms of helping community colleges where people may be going back to school. Why is that?
Oh, yeah, the pandemic has proved to be very surprising to a number of people who work at colleges in a variety of unpleasant ways. Community college enrollment is usually counter-cyclical to the economy, in that when the economy is bad, it usually goes up because people are out of work and they have time to go ahead and take some classes, or they go back to school to try to learn a new skill to get a different job. And community college enrollment reached its peak, I want to say in 2011. I may not have that right. But a few years after the most recent big recession, and has been on a slight downturn ever since overall, because the economy's been good, and so there were plenty of jobs, and there were sort of a tapering off of community college enrollment. When the pandemic hit, many people thought, and not without reason, that community college enrollment would go up because when the economy is bad, that's what happens. And in fact, there was even some talk in the spring of 2020 that it would go up even more, because there was a theory that four-year students would not go to their four-year institutions. They would stay home and take classes at the community college because it was cheaper, and they wouldn't want to go to Big State U and stay in their dorm and take classes online. But that didn't happen, and community colleges not only didn't get those four-year students, they lost students because of the reasons we talked about earlier. that many people didn't anticipate. And it's been an unpleasant surprise all around.
Has public opinion changed surrounding community college, especially when you see the way the Biden administration has talked about free community college? I don't think that's looking very likely in the infrastructure Build Back Better. But I'm wondering if you can talk about how stereotypes around community college may impact enrollment, if at all.
Well, I think a lot of things have changed. The Biden administration, the Obama administration before it, gave a lot of positive attention to community colleges. And I think that there's a broader and spreading understanding that community college degrees and credentials are not, somehow second class, and that, there are many credentials and degrees there that people can have good lives and good jobs by earning them. I do think that there's still, some perception problems in terms of community colleges, the 13th grade or whatever it is people want to sling at it. I think that community colleges probably bear some responsibility for not that they are in the business of marketing. They have a lot of other important jobs to do, but there is probably some messaging confusion there in terms of what a community college is and what it's for. There's more suspicion than ever, I think, among the American public, generally speaking, about what a college degree is worth and if it's worth as much as it costs. And the good thing in the favor of community colleges is that community college degrees are affordable, and as I said, often can lead to good jobs and good lives. So they have an advantage there, but it's I think that they still have to get the message out maybe in a better way.
Before we head to break, again, I'm talking with Lee Gardner, senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education. Are there particular states that are doing better than most when they look at a robust 2-year community college system, Lee?
Gosh, that's a hard question to answer. I think that, I don't think, I'm not sure professionally I can answer that question really. But I will say that a lot of states are doing free community college right now. And I think strictly from an access point of view, and Connecticut has some limited free, at least I understand it has some limits on it, free community college. And I think that states that are doing that are, at least in terms of access, are probably doing a good thing for its citizens. Free community colleges is dead at the national level at this point. It may come back at some point. But those programs have a lot of potential to do some good things. Tennessee, in particular, is the first state to start a state free community college program, and it has 2, which I think is something that's worth maybe emulating. They have one called Tennessee Promise, which is for students fresh out of high school, which is similar to the one that Connecticut has, I believe. They also have one called Tennessee Reconnect, which is for older students, and that one's less common. But if we have to give an edge to a state for doing a good job with its community college, the presence of that program for older students, I think, maybe gives Tennessee the edge. And maybe I have to admit that I have a slight bias since that's where I was born. But Tennessee Reconnect, the program for older students, maybe gives them a slight edge because, most community college students, I think the average age of community college students is 28 years old. There are a lot of students in community college who are those, fresh out of high school, 18, 19-year-olds, but that's not everybody. And those students who are older need help too. And in some ways they need help more. They have more responsibilities, more challenges in some ways, often. So the fact that Tennessee has that program, I think is certainly something personally I would like to see other states look at more as well.
And you mentioned Connecticut has a limited, as you mentioned, tuition-free community college program. It's known as PACT. And so students apply, and so the program covers the gap between federal and state grants. Again, you're with us is Gardner, who's senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education, as we talk about community colleges. After the break, we're going to focus on Connecticut, specifically how local institutions are working to attract and retain community college students despite many years of enrollment declines. Now, do you attend one of Connecticut's 12 community colleges? We'd love to hear from you about your program and your decision. You can join the conversation, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Lee Gardner, senior writer for the Chronicle for Higher Education, is with us as we talk about the challenges community colleges face, including enrollment declines. The spokesperson for the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities system, Lee Appleby, says full-time enrollment this semester compared to last spring is expected to decline by 6%. This naturally impacts tuition revenue, and unlike the last couple of years, federal aid won't be available to help the budget shortfall next year. The Board of Regents Finance Committee saying recently that at the moment, the 2023 deficit for the 12 community colleges will be $61 million. Given these challenges, we wanted to learn about local efforts to attract and retain students. Joining us now on Zoom is Dr. Duncan Harris, Chief Executive Officer at Capital Community College in Hartford. Duncan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good morning, Lucy.
I mentioned the enrollment declines at some Connecticut community colleges have been pretty bleak. Looking at the Journal-Inquirer reporting on Assuntuck and Manchester Community College. So what have you seen at Capital since 2019?
Yeah, since 2019, we've had a sharp decline, similar to other community colleges nationally. And so our fall-to-fall retention for this last year was actually 46%. And so 46% of the students that started fall 20 actually came back this past fall, which was obviously very concerning. The previous year we were hovering around 49%, and so we were hovering around those levels. So very concerning.
So when you share that number with us and that it is concerning, specifically for Capital Community College, talk through when you reach out to students, or if you're able to, what are some of the challenges that keep them from continuing with their degree program?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the focal area. And so it's certainly not a desire to remain in school or cognitive ability. Oftentimes it's non-cognitive barriers. And so it might be childcare, it might be housing insecurity, it might be food insecurity issues, it might be mental health. And so, one of the things that I'll suggest is that over the last few years, we've really made a concerted effort across our entire system to augment those supports. And so we recently launched an initiative with the Department of Housing, in which we now have access to rapid emergency housing. We had one of our nursing students who was in her senior year experiencing housing challenges. And so we were able to shore that up for her. And now she can focus on her program and graduate in May and roll right into one of the many jobs available in the nursing industry. And so that's just one example. There's another example around childcare. And so we're aware of, I'm a parent myself of 3 children, and that comes before CEO or other titles that I have. I know that our students are in a similar, have a similar approach to that, and parent comes first. And so oftentimes they may stop out of school due to a lack of ability to find safe and secure quality childcare. And so Beth Bai and the folks at the Office of Early Childhood have been working with our system to and have found funding that will allow us to add staffing and extend hours in our childcare centers this year. And so there's been a wide variety of approaches and tactics to shore up, those folks that aren't coming back. That we realize it's not due to a desire to complete their degrees, but oftentimes it's barriers, and it's not mission drift too. So I would suggest that as we talk about community colleges, nationally, and when you look at the initiatives that they're rolling out, while instruction remains the core part of our mission, we're finding that a need to add to that mission, robust supports that support students staying in school and completing. And so that's
I wanted to fit in a call. Catherine's calling in from West Hartford, whose, I believe, son attended one of the Connecticut community colleges. Catherine, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I can't say enough about how wonderful the Connecticut State community colleges are. We had to pull our son out of high school due to behavioral problems, and so by the time he was ready to apply to college, he had missed all the deadlines that his peers had gone through. And so the best option was community college, and it was available, it was accessible, it was affordable, and it was such a positive experience. And he did apply for the PAC program, but wasn't eligible for that. However, he was eligible for the GAP program, which is the Guaranteed Admissions Program. So he was able to seamlessly transfer to UConn, which he did this semester. He's at Stores and is able to pick up with his peers and really had a great experience that really met him where he was so that he could grow up and catch up and be able to attend college. So I can't say enough about what the state puts out to try to help and meet students at every stage of their lives. So great experience from a parent's perspective and also from his perspective. He'll graduate with a degree from UConn Stores, which is very elite for him. He knows that the beginning, though, was from Tunxus, and he's grateful for that.
Well, thank you, Catherine, for sharing that story. Duncan, earlier I had mentioned to Lee Gardner that often community college can be a gateway for people into higher education. It seems so for her son.
Yeah, it's interesting, Catherine. Thank you for that testimony to the quality of Connecticut's community colleges. And you mentioned that Tunxus met him where he was. And I think we take great pride in being student ready, not necessarily expecting all students to be college ready, which has been a pivot for us. And so I'd imagine my colleagues, that were working with your son, were able to ensure that he had what he needed to transfer and be competitive and successful in terms of the academic rigor. I think Lee a little bit earlier was talking about some of the negative stereotypes that I think plagued community colleges, in our early history. But I think what we're seeing now is that parents like Catherine recognize the value. I think the millennials and Gen Zs recognize that they don't need to do what I did in 1988 and get in the back of the station wagon and drive away to live in a dorm and paint my face on Saturdays for 4 years. And so they're seeing the value of community colleges and getting a degree and a credential, whether that's credit or non-credit, not incurring the same debt that perhaps many of their friends are incurring. We find that many of our students now coming out of high school want to get a short-term credential, versus a 2 or 4 year degree, go and enter the world of work, and then go back to school. We launched a program with Eversource, an 11-week program in which it prepares individuals to become line workers with this amazing company where they're able to get a good job right away. Eversource will pay for them to go on to get their engineering or business management degree while they're working. And so which has been a change for me. I've been working in community colleges. In March, it'll be 26 years, actually, all those in our Connecticut community college system. And I think early on in my career, there was a pretty significant pressure when we were recruiting students from high schools to really promote primarily our credit programs. But now when we go out and we're working with students in high school, we also talk to them about some of the short-term credentials that we can offer that will allow them to start working right away. And then, of course, we always encourage them, once they get that first credential, to keep going and to develop a passion for lifelong learning.
So you're mentioning some of the ways Capital Community Colleges has pivoted to provide the education or shorter certificate programs to help meet students where they are so that they can get gainful employment. But I'm wondering if you can talk more about the students that are struggling. And so some of the strategies that your community college has taken, along with how the state college and university system sees a way to help students who are starting to complete their degree.
Yeah, that's key. We have an amazing building. We're located in downtown Hartford, the former G Fox building, and there are the revolving doors that when you come in. And what I've always said is what good are those revolving doors if students come in and they find themselves back out on the street without a credential or a degree to support themselves and their families. And so we've really been focused on that retention piece. And once we get them in, how are we keeping them? And so in that regard, we recently launched an equity center. And so there's a focus on addressing some of the equity gaps that our students have. And so in the equity center, we have partners. And so there's an office, the YWCA has a program where they support women enrolled in various programs here, so they're on campus. We have the Sun Scholars, which is a program working with DCF, and so our students that are in the foster care system have a person right in our building, to provide support for them in our equity center. We also have a mentoring program for that focuses on BIPOC students, Black and Brown males and females, brother to brother and sister to sister. And so to provide, tailored, nuanced support. We've recognized that many of the males in particular aren't performing or being retained at the same rates as their white male counterparts or other cohorts. So we've recognized the need for, tailored, nuanced support for those students. And then the last thing that I'll mention is an initiative on guided pathways and guided pathways advisors. And so I actually now have a team of advisors. And previously I had maybe 4 people, 4 amazing staff members, but now I have a team of 9 guided pathways advisors. There are 2 team leaders, and then Taisha Wood, who's the head of that team. And so we now have an army of advisors to really get at what you're speaking about, which is what's going on with our students and how do we know? I think that many of the students that aren't retained, and when they decide to stop coming, it's not at 9 to 5. It may be at midnight and something happens, and they decide they're not going to come the next day. We now have individuals in place to know what's going on with Duncan when he's about to make that decision that will impact the rest of his life or his continued enrollment at the college. And so we have a number of schools that have been a part of our phase 1 of the rollout of guided pathways advisors, and they're already achieving gains. Housatonic, which is in Bridgeport, which has a very similar demographic as Capital, has achieved a 10-point fall to spring retention gain as a result of having those advisors in place. So I'm very excited about that. Those are a few of the initiatives that we've been rolling out.
And it's good to hear about these services catering to specific students who need more help or just more guidance to help them complete their degree. But I had mentioned this projected shortfall among the 12 community colleges, $61 million. And so as CEO of Capital, just one of the 12, are you concerned about some of the future decisions you'll have to make? What services will be cut? Because obviously you can't be increasing tuition at this time, but looking at how to increase enrollment.
Yeah, it's interesting because the governor just released their budget announcement, and I think that the governor and the state legislature see that if anything, there's a need to invest in our community college system at this point in time. And I'd imagine that they're recognizing the ROI. And, from my understanding, and I've worked in the space for quite some time, it's more economical to keep an existing student than to go out and find another one. And so there's been this recognition of that and investments being made in the retention of our students. And the folks in our system are working through the budget forecast. And we do believe that investments being made now will allow us to right the ship, down the pike. For me as the head of this particular campus, we're growing philanthropy. We're working with our foundation. We recently received a $3 million Title V grant, which is we're a Hispanic serving institution, and so that pays for staff in that area to offset any losses due to the block grant and things like that. And so it is a challenging time, but I feel as though the need for us and the work that we do that benefits the residents of the state of Connecticut is as great, if not greater, than it's ever been coming on the heels of the pandemic.
You mentioned you've been in the community college system for 26 years. So what you reference, it sounds like that's a change within the state legislature and the governor, because in past years, we know often when the budget needs to be met, social services and higher education, those are the first places that lawmakers cut.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, once again, I think we're being seen in a very different way as a key cog in the economic structure of the state. And when you're talking about workforce, or you're talking about individuals that are enrolled in public higher education, that are likely to stay here, raise their families, support, our K-12 systems and pay taxes, it's my students and it's the students at our CSUs. And so I think that, that there's that recognition. Very excited about, Connecticut State Community College coming online and what that will mean for us being able to do things at scale. We launched a manufacturing program this past summer, and we were able to stand it up based off of leveraging the expertise and experience of our sister institutions. And it happened in a very different way than it might have in the past. And I think that was the result of kind of this new structure that is Connecticut State Community College. So very excited about kind of where we're headed and the role that, our community colleges will play in really the revitalization of coming on the heels of the pandemic of the economy.
And you mentioned this is the merger that is underway, consolidating the community college system. So thank you, Duncan Harris, for your perspective, and just to hear about some of the ways you're pivoting at Capital to better serve your students. Dr. Duncan Harris is the Chief Executive Officer at Capital Community College in Hartford. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, Lucy.
Also here with us was Lee Gardner, senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education. Will share some of his stories looking at enrollment decline and how community colleges nationwide are responding. Lee, thank you. Coming up on Where We Live, as I mentioned, community colleges enroll more than 1/3 of college students in the U.S. We learn more about how institutions can help students complete their degrees. Duncan mentioned guided pathways. We'll talk to the Community College Research Center at Columbia University right after the break. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up tomorrow, Election Day is many months away, but the race for Connecticut governor has begun. On the next Where We Live, Republican candidate and presumptive nominee Bob Stefanowski joins us to talk about why he's running again. What questions do you have for him? Join us tomorrow. Now, today we've been talking about how two-year community colleges can respond to troubling trends made worse by the pandemic, like steep enrollment declines. We heard briefly about a model called Guided Pathways that focuses on helping a student complete their education and earn their degree. Joining us now with more is Hana Lahr, Senior Research Associate and Program Lead at the Community College Research Center at Teachers College at Columbia University. Hana, welcome to our show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So tell us more about how this model was developed at Columbia and, the focus when we think about guided pathways, how it's helping these institutions with these big time challenges.
Yeah, so the guided pathways model was really developed based on about 20 years of research that my colleagues at the Community College Research Center and I have been doing with community colleges across the country. And the idea with the guided pathways model is that it's this whole college reform where the goal is to ensure that all students are entering a community college and that they're helped to explore, enter, and complete a program of study that's aligned with their interests and goals, and that is preparing them for a good job in their community or transfer with junior standing in a major. So a program might be something, an associate's degree in a field like biology or English or sociology, where students are preparing to transfer in that major. Or it may mean a program where students are earning a credential that's preparing them for entry into the workforce after they finish at the community college.
Hana, you mentioned whole college reform, and so what you're sharing with us, it makes sense, but why wasn't this being done within community colleges before this model came about? What were some of the challenges? Was there too much fragmentation or not enough advisors to help students?
Yeah, so the original model for community colleges was really to be an institution of access, so trying to serve the needs of the community and to provide students and potential students with what they wanted to do. So for many people, it was taking a couple of classes. For some people, it was earning a short-term credential or certificate. For other people, it was preparing to transfer. But in many cases, these efforts were in some ways fragmented and not scaled. So some students would experience some services, some students would get some opportunities, but not all students had the opportunity to enter a program of study and complete a program of study. And these efforts weren't just available to all students in all programs of study.
And so now that we are hearing that many of these institutions have adopted this model, what have been the outcomes? Because even in Connecticut, we're still seeing enrollment decline. It's been that way now for a decade.
Mm-hmm. So really the Guided Pathways framework asks colleges to re-examine what programs they're offering and then to reimagine how students are onboarded into these programs. So how they're asked about what are their interests, what are their goals, and then they're able to learn about various programs that are available at the college to ensure that they're making a decision that at least is initially aligned with those interests and goals. It changes how advising is structured and delivered and how students learn the skills and knowledge and gain experience in the field to take kind of that next step. So we've been working with around 120 colleges across the country for about 6 or 7 years now to see what are some of the early outcomes. One of the challenges with Guided Pathways is that it does take about 5 to 6 years to really implement these reforms at scale. So it takes a while to see, are we improving completion? Are we improving transfer? So we really focus on these 1-year metrics, looking at how many credits students are accumulating in their first year. Are students passing Gateway Math and English courses in their first year? And based on the research we've done, we've seen that these metrics are predictive of those longer term outcomes. So if you want to move those longer term outcomes, you first need to focus on these shorter term 1-year metrics. And in our work with community colleges, we have seen increases in these early momentum metrics. And one of the things we look for is whether outcomes are improving for all students, and in particular, whether they're improving for low-income students, Black and Hispanic students as well. So we disaggregate the data to compare these outcomes for students overall and for particular student subgroups, and we're starting to see that some of these equity gaps are closing. I would say one other key metric we look at is the number of credits that students are earning for an associate's degree. And so, for example, we met with a college recently that has been implementing Guided Pathways reforms. And when they started, students were earning an average of almost 90 credits to complete their 60 credit associate degree. And now students at that college are earning on average less than 80 credits. So that's a big improvement.
We just have a couple of minutes left, Hana. I've got to ask, when we think about implementing this, is it costly, and is that a barrier that you're seeing as this model is trying to be adopted in different community college systems around the country?
Yeah, we did some research looking at how colleges are funding these reforms and how much it costs. And our research found that implementing guided pathways does require some additional resources. My colleague, Clive Belfield, who's a professor at Queens College, found that for the average community college, the startup cost to implement guided pathways is about $450 per full-time student per year. But the cost of sustaining these changes over time is lower than that. And we found that the largest costs are associated with advising, which Duncan talked about earlier. And in particular, hiring enough advisors to move to this case management model where advisors have caseload of students and they're able to really track students' progress over time. But other substantial startup costs may include providing faculty and staff release time to engage in some of this design work, as well as purchasing or upgrading some IT systems. But I would say most of the colleges that we've worked with have done this with little new money. Some of them have raised some grant funds to kind of help kick off the work and to support startup activities, but the colleges relied as much on reorganization, reassignment, and reallocation of staff and resources to really cover the ongoing costs of these reforms.
Again, we've been talking about guided pathways. This is a framework developed by the Community College Research Center at Teachers College at Columbia University to make sure every student has an academic and career plan, receives advising and support to help them complete their degree. Hana Lahr is a senior research associate and program lead at the Community College Research Center at Teachers College. Hana, thank you for explaining this model. We appreciate your perspective today.
Thanks for having me.
Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Our technical producer is Kat Pastor. And again, tomorrow, Bob Stefanowski joins us to talk about his second time running in the Connecticut gubernatorial race. He's a presumptive Republican nominee. We hope you join us with your questions, too.